The first game they taught me to play was to make a candle flame jump, just by thinking about it.
Warning signs of satanic behavior may be apparent, such as a sudden, bitterly antagonistic attitude towards family and religion.
Incubus, can you hear me?
Yes, Master.
If Incubus is sleeping, how can he hear me? Maybe because he's lying? Dirty, dirty liar! Evil, evil white boy! Incubus lying! He lied! He lied! He lied! He lied!
On a night that most people are doing the opposite, in worshiping the devil, we're here to worship the Lord.
Happy Halloween, retro game enthusiasts. In this episode of Rank and Review, I'll be ranking and reviewing spooky Sega titles on the 8-bit Master System. Some of these have been fully explored on this channel, most haven't. Let's forego the typical wordy introduction and just dive into it, shall we? Altered Beast. As a frequent arcade haunter back in the day, words can't describe what Sega meant to me, or what seeing those big bold blue letters still brings to mind. With a limited amount of change on hand as a kid, eyeing that familiar typeface etched on a marquee was a customer satisfaction guarantee. Yes, I played my fair share of Altered Beast, draped in the smells of cigarette smoke and the sweaty body odors of strangers, but the biggest of deals was when it was released as a pack-in game with the Genesis. It's not much to look at now, but back then, this was everything. I knew the Atari kits and the NES. I had an affair with an Apple II and a Commodore 64 a few times, but this was something new, different, arcade perfection at home. People may now in modern times turn their nose up at this relatively basic action title, but those of us who were there in '89, well, we recognize. What will be made abundantly clear throughout the course of this video is that Master System ports seemed almost like an afterthought. Clearly I have an appreciation for the hardware. I've been an active 8-bit Sega enthusiast since the late 80s, and this video took months to make, but at times it almost seemed like the company was intentionally bungling these games up. This is a truly abysmal showing. Looks aren't everything, my partner reminds me of every day, but this performance, also terrible. Another thing I'm guilty of. When looks and performance are a no-go, all that's left is personality. The cheap-looking ransom note lettering, wretched speech, choppy scrolling, spotty hit detection, hell, I'd even go as far as to say that the unlicensed NES abomination plays better. At least on that one, Asmic had the decency to assign jump to up on the D-pad. Here on Sega's own machine, it's necessary to push both face buttons to get this muscle load to leap. Hitting aerial enemies is a chore, sluggishly trying to avoid attacks a nuisance. Getting stun locked was always a thing, but the slowdown here makes it feel so much more intrusive. Continue codes are hidden behind a few button prompts, but by the second stage, I usually throw in the towel. Even the blood-pumping beast mode theme sounds more like a meager suggestion rather than a demon-melting power metal man-meat scorcher. Beast mode, beast mode, beast mode. Screw this game, return to your grave, give up on the daughter. Sorry, Zeus. Have any of you played Wolfchild on the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis? How about on a computer kit? Ever tasted a fresh summer plum while taking a dump in a neighbor's garden? Core before Tomb Raider, pits after plums. This is as unfinished as it gets, but still better than Altered Beast, which was a recognizable property sold on shelves for human money. It looks pretty incredible for an 8-bit title, and controls well enough, but no music? Yo, how dare you silence this? Wolfchild, you! No music is a deal breaker, dude. Wolfchild, technically impressive, ultimately a letdown. Reflections Interactive, Psygnosis before the PlayStation. It's a computer game. Shadow of the Beast is something I've always wanted to love. Lovecraftian horror, inspired imagery, incredible music. Oh, what a tune. This is an impressive port for the 8-bit Master System. The animation is solid, even if it takes 1.5 million years to turn around. Look at this scrolling. Too bad the action is zoomed right in, so it's nearly impossible to react to enemies. Pull out the camera, people. This ain't no Game Gear. Why is my dude so slow to attack when everything else gets all up on me? Give us a chance, balance your games. Psygnosis orbs. What the fuck is this music? These backgrounds? Am I trapped inside a murder computer?
Call, Master.
Every kid loves Francis Ford Coppola flicks. Bram Stoker's Dracula. An R-rated phenomenon that could have been great if it weren't for the casting of Keanu as the main dude. Whoa. No disrespect, Reeves is awesome. Speed, the entire Matrix thing, yes, I enjoy them all. The 2 Bill and Ted movies were my life as a kid. John Wick, unfortunately, Jonathan Harker, he is not. A fine mimic of accents, he ain't.
Yes, sir. I will give it my full attention.
Sex, violence, horror, why not adapt this into a video game for every device under the sun? Dracula. This is a PAL exclusive. You know, the folks who still had some hope for the Master System in the early 90s. The UK and Brazil were gifted this port of an already shitty NES game, still better than the 16-bit alternatives, so I guess there's that. These question mark etched item blocks say it all. Sony, you hacks. Probe, Psygnosis, you monsters. One thing I can't comprehend is having a difficulty option that penalizes the player. If you're only going to allow me to access a few stages, spell it out when I'm making my decision. Don't cut the game short. This ain't Contra. What's worse is that I chose normal, not easy. Normal only allows a few levels and can be beaten lickety-split. This is a quote feature unquote on the 16-bit devices as well. Piss off. How obnoxious. Sure, I could have put in the effort and attempted it on hard, but out of self-respect I said screw it. Sorry people, I couldn't be bothered. Harker's animations are decent. He looks great in those Princess Leia duds, but again, what's with the question mark blocks? Mario and Star Wars cosplay all around. Maybe if they spent a few moments with Super Mario Bros. For the NES, they could have figured out how to develop a boss that didn't move around like clip art, or create enemies that didn't materialize out of thin air at the last second, forcing collision damage. It's at least possible to actually see the spike traps in these 8-bit versions, unlike the cheap ones on the Super Nintendo and Mega Drive Genesis. Holy moly, intense music! Whoa! Sony, have they ever done anything in the video game space worth a damn? Laser Ghost, an arcade port for the Light Phaser peripheral. Light phased and laser ghosts as the lady from The Office walks from point A to B in a Riding Hood red dress. Use the squishy smoosh smoosh Master System D-pad to control the cursor or fire. Blast trigger that plastic phaser finger pusher. It's a light gun game. A pretty good one. Sega knew how to do it. Nintendo had boring, sterile zapper games. The Light Phaser was given a purpose with titles like this. It's not perfect. Things appear super quickly, but the music, sound effects, and graphics are engaging. Think Splatterhouse if it were a basic shooter. Character, a boatload of character. Just be careful to avoid those candles. And then there was darkness. Alien 3 isn't a bad movie. It's still my third favorite in the exhausted overwrought series. Fincher nailed the visuals, and I like the return to horror. With a few tweaks, it could have been great, which is almost exactly how I describe not only this Alien 3 game, but all of the ones I've played. I don't want to be comparing across all kits for each of these entries, but somewhere between the 16 and 8-bit Sega versions lies a solid search rescue title. The Mega Drive Genesis controls better, but baddies be all up on you due to the enlarged sprites. Here, more of the environments are visible, but Ripley maneuvers like a 400-pound clown. Both rely on rote memorization, as you're forced to save inmates under far too strict of a time limit. The biggest flaw here is that tight timer. It's astounding that the playtesters didn't recommend a longer fuse. Mapping and then memorizing out paths to collect the prisoners, then reach the exit is mandatory. There's not much time to spare, even on a near-perfect run. The other problem is the speed in which the xenomorphs attack. Yes, there's more screen real estate than the 16-bit alternative, but without that extra button to cycle through Ripley's weaponry, players are forced to tap down down in conjunction with jump to swap guns. They should have somehow paused the action while selecting, forced an item screen, or reduced the amount of gear. Anything would have been better than this. It's like they shrunk down the 16-bit version into an 8-bit cart without considering gameplay. Movement is jittery, ladders are finicky, jumping is stiff, the getting around is a mess, which is a real shame because the presentation and music are both solid. Well, you know, except Ripley's ugly mug here. Yikes, dude. Halloween indeed. Friday the 13th at least. Part of me wishes all these things were just plain bad. At least then I could take the piss out of them. The music for all of these versions is so solid, especially the weird Game Boy one. I return to all of them frequently to force myself to get into a groove, but after struggling with the controls and unbalanced alien onslaught, I quit prematurely. Until the next attempt. Here's an odd one. Before the Mutant League games were grossing out parents and younger siblings on Sega's 16-bit kit, they were doing it G-rated style on the Master System with Basketball Nightmares. Only, don't expect that EA quality here. Yeesh, this is a flashy mess. Flashy dunks and pixels. Seriously though, how great do these animated cutscenes look? At least we know where the budget went. Each court introduces a new team of monsters, a couple are identifiable, some are strange, such as this group of Cyclops platypus opponents from Bedrock. Maybe I'm missing something, but I think it's only possible to play as humans. Different countries are represented, but why can't I control the werewolves? What an oversight. In theory, switching players should be an option on the court, and it kinda is, but I couldn't reliably get it to select the nearest diaper-wearing dude. My advice, stick with whomever the game automatically chooses, and settle. Passing, defending, it's all a jumbled crapshoot. Pounding a button on defense occasionally steals the ball, but without any visual or audio cue, it's all a mess. This be one sloppy game of basketball. Fortunately, the computer doesn't put up a fight until the second to last court. Either my skills improved or the difficulty didn't increase at all because I was dominating and I couldn't find an option to toggle the challenge level. Sometimes they'd be in the key for an easy basket and pass it around uncontested. Passing isn't something to rely on, but the shooting feels nice. There's a sweet spot. Hold the button and release. Dunking is the same. I found 3-pointers extremely easy to make almost everywhere except the top of the key. The music is exceptional, but with 2 composers I'm disappointed that there's only one theme for every court. Backgrounds are all unique, so why couldn't they create more tunes? It all starts feeling very repetitive and bland after a few matches. Playing hoop was never so dull. Basketball Nightmare was only released in regions that still cared about the Master System in '89, and Canada for some reason. It has charm, flash, and ideas for days, but fails to maintain my interest after a few matches. A real shame, because there's something truly wonderful here. As a fan of the sport and a former player, both competitively and recreationally, I love a good video game interpretation. This console had an underwhelming amount of quality sports titles, so this might actually be one of the best, for what that's worth. Another licensed movie game with potential. The Addams family had a few variations from 92 to 94 on every device under the sun. This is a strange, late port of the bland, unforgiving NES one. As Gomez, it's up to you to rescue the family from in and around the mansion. Visually, this thing is really quite something. So many colors, excellent shading, dynamic varied backgrounds and areas. I covered the NES original in a bite-sized bits short. Frankly, it looks like cheap, pale dog shit compared to this Master System alternative. Again, we're not here to compare, but it's impossible not to address these obvious improvements. As I've said before, looks aren't everything. Unfortunately, this thing controls worse, which is an achievement because the original was a little iffy to begin with. This landed almost a full decade after Super Mario Bros., but they somehow couldn't get the head stomping right. Gomez often phases through enemies, draining his health bar in the process. It feels cheap, like a piece of Codemaster's crap or something from Action 52. They wisened up when adapting it for the Master System. Cheese now drops more frequently from outside piranha plants to refill the health bar. bar. Improvements or errors in code we may never know because some traps don't inflict damage the way they're supposed to. The reason this isn't higher on the list is simply due to how inconsistent and sloppy it all is. Look at how frequently I'm nailed by something I can't possibly react to straight out of a screen transition. Door! A nitpick, but door being written out like this is just lame. Pure microcomputer tackiness. Oh, how I wonder where this was made. Like many Ocean titles, it's a wacky collectathon. It's also a fairly open, explorable world. It's not as tightly crafted or as interconnected as the far better 16-bit bearers of the same name, but each area is unique, often with its own individual theme. One of the first tasks is to rescue Wednesday from the freezer, by far the trickiest platforming in the entire adventure, right up front with it. That was a choice, I suppose. Clearing these chasms is no easy feat. Ice physics combined with the need for pixel-perfect jumps is not a good combination. Many traps and enemies only appear once, which is neat. Variety is the spice of life, I suppose. Basically, it's all about collecting bits and bobs. Releasing a frozen Wednesday, then thawing her out in the oven rewards an item to get somewhere else. Pugsley is stuck, so it's necessary to gather 3 ingredients to create a shrinking potion. Logical, of course. Keys, clues. Thing can be summoned a few times to create an invincibility shield once it has been located on a shelf. Thing, not it. Cousin it isn't in the game. Thing. Lurch reveals hidden rooms when given specific sheets of music. In one case, an exit to the garden, guarded by these nightmarish creatures. Some stuff is truly bonkers, but hey, it's the Addams family. I dig. Stacks of bills, jewels. Collecting $1 million is the true goal, as it's impossible to reach the final boss if you can't pass the cash weigh-in station. Silly, really, but that's how they decided to gate it. There's currency everywhere, sometimes in the most ridiculously hidden places. Tapping action on every mysterious wall is almost necessary to locate all of the treasures, which would only be a bit annoying if it wasn't so specific. Look at me leap across this, tip-tap-tapping away before it recognizes the input in the pixel-perfect location to access the secret cache chamber. No bosses until the pair at the end, and you had better love that Addams Family theme, fucker. Holy crap! Get a LeVar Burton Reads podcast queued up.
No.
There are a handful of other themes, but they're all underwhelming. Most are far too similar. For whatever reason, they got rid of my favorite tune from the NES version. Unlike a lot of movie adaptations, especially from this era, it seems like someone put in some effort here. It's still extremely annoying that they're so loosey-goosey about what you can and can't stomp on. It's Ocean, collect stuff, bone room, ride the bone room, shitty hit detection, bone room, invincibility frames, repeat hits, bone room, no lessons learned from a decades-old head-stomping game. It's not as cynical as simply slapping a popular name on a piece of crap for idiot kids to blindly beg their parents to buy, but it's still Ocean. It's still not amazing. Ideas were had, things were developed, it respects its source material. All in all, in the lazy land of 8-bit movie games, this is a crowning achievement. The Addams Family titles that dropped on the next generation of hardware were almost legitimately awesome, so there's that too. This is the video game equivalent of a corny but mildly entertaining B-movie. Get a big bowl of popcorn, a tall pint of bleach, mute that music, and tuck in. I love Alien Storm in the arcade and on the Mega Drive Genesis. It's amazing that they even got this thing running on a Master System without excising huge chunks. This isn't a one-to-one port, but it's definitely closer to the arcade. The Mega Drive Genesis version began in a dusty old town instead of a city. Things are switched up every which way. On the Master System, the environments are often different, bosses are new, 2-player co-op has been removed, and Karen, or Carla as she's known in some versions, is missing altogether, probably fighting a Twitter war. Beefy McGeneric Mancakes and Glow Stick Whip Dick Doofy Droid as controllable alien busters. Their title, not mine. Decent music from the hardware, responsive controls, colorful, detailed environments and backgrounds. These first-person sequences are extremely impressive, but unfortunately the movement speed and hit detection feels off all around. When it comes to a basic arcade game like this, dodging, running, and shooting need to feel great. They do not. Enemies aggressively magnetize to the playable protagonist in an irritating way, and the weaponry feels weak. You'll need to hit a baddie in a specific spot to do damage, and evading attacks is unreliable at best. If this was your first Alien Storm experience, I could see it being a console favorite. For me, it doesn't feel quite right. Even the auto-scrolling running sequences are a bit sloppy. This is one of the better home ports on the console, but it's lacking. It could have been worse. Cough, cough, golden axe, but some tweaks to the gameplay were desperately needed. A shame, because on the surface, most of what I love about its big boy brethren is here. Another Sega arcade favorite, Alien Syndrome. Now this and Alien Storm could swap positions here. I gave the edge to Syndrome simply because it offers more bang for your buck. This is not a good port. The map is missing, baddies generate slowly all over, oftentimes right where the player is standing, so keep the pace up. Weapons all feel the same, laser beams travel through multiple creatures and some walls, but you're also pretty much good to go with the fireball. Why are there weapon downgrade pickups? Get bent. Don't do that. Warp tiles are introduced, save the hostages, reach the exit. Distractingly, at least one stage has more people to save than required to reach the big bad. Unlike Alien 3, the time limit is generous, pretty spot on reasonable, and a few extra seconds get added when entering a boss arena. These things are gruesome in design, sometimes perverse. Their hitboxes are way too small, but that's nothing new. The arcade was similar, but here they're not optimized very well for the hardware. A chug-a-chug-chug, ball sacks, eldritch horrors, Ghostbuster action figure rejects. Each stage introduces a new assortment of enemies, but they all just sort of trudge about doing collision damage. Weird projectile spewing monster tiles are prevalent through each level, an addition that is neither impressive or offensive. Toru Nakabayashi's catchy arcade themes have been replaced with minimal ambient bleep bloops, which are oddly effective at creating tension. When the last prisoner is released, the music gets more exciting and the boss themes get the job done. In all honesty, I just love the pick up and play action of Alien Syndrome. Of all the ports from the era, I'd choose this one last. The unlicensed NES version has more charm and allows the player to choose between the two characters. I'd go the Game Gear route. Most Sega handheld titles were straight Master System ports, but this one is its own thing built from the ground up. I did a bite-sized bits YouTube short about it, so give that a look. Those drop every Tuesday and Thursday if you aren't aware. Shameless self-promotion. Let's get those numbers up so I can monetize again. Sometimes the simplest approach is the best. Ghost House is a somewhat sorta spiritual successor to Monster Bash, a 1982 arcade exclusive by Sega. Similar to that and other early classics from the company, the mechanics are simple, tight, and addictive. Everything about this game is finely tuned. At a time, it was the only Sega card I owned, before I consolidated my collection. You play as a squeaky sneaker named Mick, and it's your job to unlock, then defeat 5 Draculas plural per round. The loop is simple. Find a key, get a knife, shank that sucker, collect a gem, repeat until the exit appears. The action is frantic, each round is infested with monsters, but as I said, the getting around is so tight. Fists fly when Mick is without a weapon, jumping is precise, baddies have recognizable patterns, all except for Dracula, who darts around like a bat out of hell, pun intended. The more of him or them you dispose of, the quicker they get. Passing a mantle launches an arrow, stomp a few with precision timing, and you're given an invincibility perk. Nimble neon strobe dance party. Suck it! Hit the lights! Freeze them foes. Leaping through a chandelier causes a knife to shoot out from either side of the screen. Use those squeaky shoes to smack it down, and now Mick is mackin', packing a powerful limited weapon. 3 direct hits on Drac takes him out. A health refill, your reward. Hiroshi Kawaguchi's score is repetitive but catchy. The sound effects are punchy. What else can I say? If you dig arcade action games, you can do a whole hell of a lot worse. Ghost House is as solid and concise as they come, baby. Ghostbusters, if something strange in neighborhood, who gonna call? Ghostbusters, if something weird and don't good, who gonna call? Ghostbusters. I think a lot of people ignore Ghostbusters on the Master System. Maybe they don't know it exists, or perhaps they've seen it in action and assume it's exactly like the dreadful NES version. I mean, there are folks who think retro gaming begins and ends with Nintendo. The numbers don't lie. Ghostbusters is bad there. Real bad. Required to refuel the Ecto-1 bad. But almost everywhere else, It's good. Unique, varied gameplay, controls that feel tight 99% of the time, more on that later, vibrant colors, some replay value, you kinda get what you put into this thing. And if the Ghostbusters theme is your jam, you could be set for life. Compile created this Master System port, and they're a quality developer. It's based closely on David Crane's 1994 original, which was excellent on almost every home computer. I'm pretty familiar with the Commodore 64 version, which is super good. Now, none of this is gonna mean anything to you if you don't enjoy the fundamentals. I've heard some call this thing bad over the years, and that's simply not the case. Some people watch a playthrough on YouTube or a stupid review and mimic other idiots who only know the terrible version. If you're legit not into it, I understand, but it's far from bad. Conceptually, it follows the film quite well without dumbing down the adult bits. You know, unlike everything else that has existed with the Ghostbusters name since the late 80s. Yeah, I'll watch the sequel. 2/3 of the movie? Pretty damn good. Also, some of those early cartoon episodes were quality, specifically the ones written by J. Michael Straczynski, or Michael Reeves, before they sanded down the edges due to network interferences and gave that filthy fuck Slimer a voice. This Sega port does what those early episodes did. It retains all the fun of that first flick without getting too childish. There's text about bank loans, and decisions need to be made while balancing a budget. These are the beats. Buy a car and load it up with a limited amount of gear while remaining under budget. Drive around without ever having to refuel the gas tank. Seriously, the person who added that to the NES version, well, you know. Capture ghosts manually by swapping between the busters on screen, bring them up, bring them in, tap the button to capture, drop them off at headquarters.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Buy gear when needed, suck them bananas down, on the move. Adorable little circles, tennis anyone, avoid the gatekeeper and keymaster, bait the ghouls when Stay Puft starts getting horny, watch as that meter continues to rise. It's a fairly simple gameplay loop, and again, it won't be everyone's cup of tea, but it's a clever little piece of software. When everything pops off at the high rise, 2 of the 3 Ghostbusters need to sneak past the Marshmallow Man. 2 of the 3 white dudes, because yes, like a lot of games based off the first flick, Winston got the shaft. They didn't even consider Arsenio for this role. Once inside, it's all about climbing the steps to the roof. One button fires horizontally, the other on an upwards angle. Only one dude needs to make it, and it can't be Ernie Hudson. Great gameplay, tight controls everywhere except the map screen, where you maneuver the Ghostbusters logo for some stupid reason. Maybe if it was a person or a car, it wouldn't stick to every corner in a filthy way, but like I said, 99%. Even this Atari-style effects showcase against dyslexic Gozer is a thrill. 5,000? 5,000 for saving New York fucking City?
$5,000? I had no idea it'd be so much. I won't pay it.
Well, that's all right. We can just put it right back in there. Thank you. We certainly can, Dr. Beckman.
So I'm not trying to rush through, but it's Rampage. This is Rampage. Control one of 3 classic movie monster types, completely original, 0 copyright infringement, kaiju style, destruction mechanics, beat the hell out of buildings, munch on a few peeps for extra health, travel. It's Rampage. I captured footage solo for all of these games, but this thing really shines cooperatively with a friend, loved one, or mortal enemy. It's the best port of the era of this truly memorable Midway arcade game. Did they make a movie of this? I sound like a broken record, but the colors really pop. It also doesn't hurt that the controls are tight and that all 3 beasts are here. Barely a complaint, but after a few cities, I tend to get bored. It's a very basic loop, but there's also nothing inherently wrong with it. Rampage be Rampage, a quality, basic bash fest. Rock on, werewolf, rock on. I'm sure everyone has that one title or series they're completely incompetent at. A white whale kind of situation. Oh, damn it, whale! For me, it's an entire franchise, and that's the Ghosts and Ghouls and Goblins and Goblins and Ghosts and Ghouls games. I'm bad, like can't finish a single stage in some of them levels of awful. It doesn't make sense. Yes, they're notoriously difficult, but I'm pretty great at other challenging action platformers. Capcom games are my jam. I want to do better, but I'm just completely useless. The Gargoyle Demon Firebrand side series is one of my favorites across various Nintendo devices, but I'm totally inept at these core entries. Ghouls and Ghosts was one of the earliest Mega Drive Genesis arcade ports. I'm awful at it, but can appreciate the quality as well as its overall importance. It and this are the ones I dig the most, mainly due to the 4-way directional firepower. Bing bop bleep bloop. Sega handled development instead of Capcom on the 16-bit kit, but what am I saying? We're all about the Master System today, peoples. Arc System Works were given the reins to adapt it. for the device. A relatively late release that is much easier than any Ghosts and Goblins and Ghouls and Ghosts out there. I think it performs better here than Ghosts and Goblins on the NES. There are some issues, such as how Arthur stutters mid-jump while attacking, but relatively speaking, it's a breeze. All of the stages are less populated with traps and enemies, making it easier overall to avoid taking damage. Item rooms have been introduced, and each stage is broken up into pairs. Basically, there are 3 checkpoints per level, 2 action platforming sequences, and a big bad. Continuing is possible as well from each of these. Overly helpful. From what I can tell, all of the bosses are here, but they're now exiled to their own arenas, probably to account for the diminutive cart size. Each upgrade is permanent. Even after losing all his lives, Arthur hangs on to his magic spells and shield enhancements. The latter makes some of the tougher areas and bosses a cakewalk. Plus, just look at this animation. The size of the magic meter is gigantic, even before leveling it up, so use that sorcery generously. Careful though, it doesn't work when Arthie is in his undies. Upgrading the shoes makes our main man walk faster and jump further, which is almost necessary for some of the bigger gaps. Armor can now be souped up, allowing extra hits. Hearts are hits. Look at how gloriously forgiving these developers made this video game. I love it. But totally understand how hardcore veterans could be turned off. This is going high on the list because it's a solid port. The third stage is a prick, for me, more challenging than the final 2. It's bad all around, but the only shit stage. I mean, hey, are we playing Super Ghouls and Ghosts right now? The slowdown is filthy. It's identifiably Ghouls and Ghosts, and you'll have to finish it twice to save that precious prin. Some of the best music on the hardware. Let's ride out of this section with the delicious Continue theme. Kenseiden is a game we've explored before on this channel in its own dedicated review, back when I insisted on capturing footage from actual hardware but couldn't be arsed to invest in an upscaler. You know, the era of consistently wrong aspect ratios, worse audio and video, the whole 9. Still, if you're looking for a more in-depth review, you can find it here in the annals of Trollfeed 101 game reviews. What can I say? It's still awesome. This could have easily taken the top spot. I only went with the other because it was more Halloween-y. Kenseiden is Sega through and through. Deliberate, shinobi-style action movements, colorful, stylized graphics, inspired enemy and stage design sprinkled lightly with some basic RPG mechanics. It's got it all. Few have lazily described this as a feudal Japan Castlevania knockoff, but that's not true. Sure, there are some similarities, but that's like calling Sekiro a Souls game. It devalues it, even undermines the differences, and there are a lot of things Kenseiden does to set itself apart. As you progress through several stages set across a variety of Japanese provinces, you'll gain scrolls to enhance your attacks and movements. These can be revisited at any point after the second level, when the map branches out a bit. The goal is to gain enough power to take on the final boss, so yeah, it's a video game. It's visually striking with glorious reds, oranges, greens, purples, and blues. Enemies are ghastly with unique inspired designs, and the bosses are simply awesome, all except this one. Screw this dude's hitbox. Our protagonist, Hayato, is a thrill to control. Sword strikes, platforming, the getting around is weighty. Again, think Shinobi, specifically Revenge of Shinobi with maybe a scant peppering of classic Belmont and Link from Zelda 2. This is a tough game that requires precision, so those who prefer nimbler, more forgiving action adventures may find themselves in over their head. Most of the time, it's reasonable, but getting hit forces a backstep stagger that would make Ryu Hayabusa shake his head. The composer is a mystery, but these tunes make the most of the Master System's sound chip, or chips if you prefer. of the translated text is charmingly off, but the story of warlocks, demons, and dragon lords gets through. Continues are mercilessly rare, so training and a mastery of Hayato's skills is crucial. Dying removes everything. Skills, progress, it's a real bastard. If I'm being completely honest, I think the difficulty could have been decreased a smidge. This is a fairly long game for what it expects of the player, and sometimes the odds feel a bit too stacked against Hayato. Enemies, platforming, and traps can be a little unforgiving. Some generosity with continues could have even helped, and maybe some health drops. There are some, but they are far too rare. Biohazard, tome pickups refill life automatically when the bar is drained, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Jump on, jump off, jump on, jump off. That's right, kid. Kenseiden figured out the stair situation. This is a tremendous Master System adventure that fans of challenging precision action platformers should try at least once. It's second on this list, and one of the greatest games on the hardware for my money. Another I've covered on this channel, both in fact. This Master System game as well as the handheld alternative. Cutscenes tell the tale in perfect English, it's an easy to follow plot, something happens, a Ouija board, Dr. Social, wonderful. Think Castlevania, but the main weapon can be switched out. Of course they want you to have the dagger, the worst, because, you know, secondary projectiles are a thing and they're deployed by pressing up in conjunction with the action button. Another familiar concept. Bombs, boomerangs, pistols, picking up the same sub-weapon back to back increases the ammo count. Stick with the loony Acme boom bangs because they wreck bosses, stuns them dead. Ultimately, this will be a cakewalk for those familiar with these types of games. Checkpoints are generous, health drinks are everywhere, and upgrades exist on almost every screen. Freeze frame. The always reliable Yoko Wada composed the music along with Takashi Horiguchi, another big name in Master System soundtracks. Most of these tunes are catchy, well orchestrated, and punchy. My only complaint is that the stages drag on a bit, so each brief ditty gets repetitive. Listen to this boss theme though. Heavy metal monster dozer. Speaking of the big bads, there are a few memorable ones here. This Skull Lady is extremely well animated with an arena worthy of the 8-bit Sega Wall of Fame. It's real good, but in all honesty, none of these are designed very well gameplay-wise until the final encounter. Some of the backgrounds look alive. SNES Castlevania Crouch Walk represent, stairs are funky, but we all can't be Kenseiden, and some stages are a bit too familiar. At the end of the day, Sims did an excellent job representing Western horror with this often overlooked Master System classic. Jack the Ripper, supervillains, the River Thames, a house of wax, poltergeist rooms, a beautiful little action adventure that shouldn't remain unplayed. Master of Darkness is the master of this list for all these reasons. Next time on this channel, an appreciation for our brothers in arms on the original PlayStation, an antiquated classic for the times, so stay tuned.
Great stuff! At last! A show for me! A show that speaks to me! That was great! Oh, Golden Girls.